there's a lot of dialogue out there about who should be on and who shouldn't be on the Chaney Wall of Fame. I've been asked about a number of times, what's the criteria?
Today we're going to talk about, college football season's upon us. And, we were talking about some of the players that went on to play college and had some maybe exceptional careers or exceptional experiences. And so you kind of brought up the idea of some of the Chaney players throughout history who have been involved in either national championships, some bowl games, just some things of college football significance, maybe is a way to put it. And so I guess that's what we're going to kind of talk about today. And you had some thoughts and some ideas of the direction for this to go, but I think we're just going to kind of focus on the post Chaney playing days and some names through that time.
Yeah, there's quite a few guys. I mean, if you just isolated to what they referred to as the Wall of Fame at Chaney and the guys that went on to be All-Americans, there's a number of stories there and great successes. And if we go in that direction and understand this, there's going to be, I'm sure, guys that I'm not even aware of that were in bowl games or, had great success in college that I'm missing or that don't come to mind. And it's certainly not meant to slight anyone. But if we just isolated on the guys that were all Americans and or close to being all Americans, like I said, I think we have quite a wide range of topics there. So if we started chronologically, and I know that there were guys that went on to play at Ohio State and maybe other bigger schools. That I'm not, like I said, I'm not aware of. But if we started with the most notable one, Frank Sinkowicz, the Heisman Trophy winner, him and Pochner went down to Georgia together, and they were recruited by Wally Butts was the coach for Georgia at the time, and of course, both of them were first team All-American. I looked at their bowl history, and I actually have an interesting photograph on my phone that I got from my dad of him and Frank Sinkowicz on a golf course that is really a great and sentimental photo. But I also have a photo from the newspaper of Sinkowicz and Pochner in coming out of the shower from the waist up. And hugging, celebrating that they were announcing that they just announced that they were going to the Rose Bowl, where they played UCLA and won 9-0. Yeah, it's really a great photo. But yeah, I think their bowl experience, Sinkowicz and Pochner. In 1942 they played in the Orange Bowl. They won 40-26 over TCU, and in 43 they played UCLA in the Rose Bowl. We were just talking about it. UCLA won 9-0. So that was, the first notable experience. Now, neither one of those were for the national championship. As a matter of fact, Georgia finished, I believe, 11-1 that year.
So, just to, I guess, at that point in time, the NFL was not what it is today. Right now, the NFL is king, right? And so to be in the mix for a national championship, to play in a bowl game,
major bowl game, yeah.
When they had, I couldn't even. Every year you have to, calculate how many new bowl games are up.
Right.
It's the significance of that was vastly different than it is today, because that was probably the pinnacle of football.
Oh,
was college football, national championship, bowl games.
Sure. And some of the schools, like some of the Ivy schools, that were, probably maybe around that time, but more so a little earlier, Princeton, Yale,
Sure.
They were, Princeton has like, I don't know, 10 national championships from like 1890 to 1920.
Right.
And which brings up the next guy, the next All-American, Frank McFee in 1950, played for Princeton, and I looked up their bowl history, and evidently Princeton didn't go, or Ivies weren't going to bowl games. Now, because even in the early years, there's nothing listed, and maybe I don't know what the history is when the actual bowl games started, the big bowl games, but he played on a team, first team All-American, played on a team that was 9-0. His 3 years of starting, 9-0, 9-0, and 8-1. I mean, they had phenomenal success, but they weren't in the mix for a national championship. I think around that time, the academies were Army and Navy were. I know in 1960 when Bellino played that they were in the mix for national championship or right around there.
Yeah, that's back in those days, Notre Dame Army. Right?
Yeah,
that was was a huge rivalry and a huge game, and obviously times have changed.
Right, and so Frank McFee, who was the next All-American that Chaney produced, after him, the person that went up as far as on the Wall of Fame at Chaney was Mike De Niro, who was a preseason All-American pick, and his life obviously ended tragically in an accident.
So can who refresh my memory, who is on the Wall of Fame that qualifies as the All-Americans, just to kind of get that list?
Okay, Sienkiewicz and Pochner.
Yep.
McFee.
Okay.
De Niro. Olszewski, Jerry Olszewski.
Okay.
Matt Cavanaugh.
Okay.
Mike Zordich. Brad Smith, Anthony Floyd, and I believe that's it.
Okay. And so then you have a separate category, which is coaches.
Coaches, correct.
Right. So you have the player piece, the coaches piece, and are all 4 coaches up?
The first 4 coaches are up.
Oh,
Yes.
right. That's what I was
Yes.
focusing on. And I don't want to get off topic, but who was the first one, or how did that process start?
As far as
Well, like a player being put up on the wall.
a player or a coach?
A player.
Player was what's been told to me over the years is that a player had to have All-American status.
Right. So I guess what I'm asking is, was the first player to go up, was it Sienkiewicz? And
Sienkiewicz and Pochner.
okay, so those
The
two
original
guys,
three pictures that were up before anything, that when West turned into Chaney on
okay.
731 South Hazelwood, the 3 pictures that came from the old Chaney into the new Chaney were Sienkiewicz, Pochner, and McFee.
The player McFee, not
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So those were up at West.
Originally, they were up at West, and there were some other ones up.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there were. Yeah, actually, my father's picture was up at West, and when I went to school there, Chess told me that, and he was in his last year of teaching, and no one knows what happened to him.
Do sounds familiar. Do you know where they were? Teaching at West, I wondered where they might have been.
I believe they were in that lobby area, like when you come in from Hazelwood, those doors.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a trophy area on the right underneath what would have been that balcony where they had gymnastic equipment and
you mean by the auditorium there? I forgot about.
No, the auditorium was down the hallway. When you came in,
oh, it's been so long.
See, the gymnasium was like the newer section of that building.
Right.
Okay. And there were doors that led right into the gymnasium.
Yes. Right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
On both sides, on both sides of the gym.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And those doors that led into the gym there was a hallway that lined up that went from door to door.
Okay.
And on the right, there were trophy cases.
Okay.
And it's my understanding that that's where the pictures were, in the wall areas there.
Okay. Yeah, that's where we park every day, and I'm trying to think back to that. It's been 20 years.
Yeah.
Walk past it every day for 2 years and can't remember it.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you know who? I don't know. It's a pretty neat thing to have a life-size photo of somebody up. And do you know how that came about, or was it just, hey, this is something, a culture we're going to create and we're going to do? And
yeah, I think they. I think it was to honor the All-Americans.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly you got a Heisman Trophy winner, and his friend, who's also an All-American, playing on the same team. They're both named to the All-America team. One wins the Heisman. I think it was just the other became a World War II hero.
right.
Right. And I just think it was, well, let's honor these guys and,
Gotcha.
And do that. And then, shortly after that, when Frank McFee won All-American status at Princeton, he just naturally went up also.
Okay. So back to, you were talking about Sienkiewicz, Pochner, McFee. Sorry to segue.
Yeah, and when I was, before I even came to Chaney, I mean, that was hallowed ground to walk into that gym lobby and see those three big pictures, okay, and then the rest of the lobby, which the coaches at the time, Red and Ed, had adorned with all city pictures and individual pictures.
Right.
I mean, that
and
was
the giant map with
Ohio and the United
Yeah.
States of the guys where they went to school.
Yeah. So back to kind of your topics of bowl games and
So in staying with the wall, then the next person that went up was Chess McFee.
okay.
He was Board of Education president, first coach at Chaney, had tremendous success, produced tremendous amount of successful athletes in numerous sports, and they honored him with the Board of Education honored him with a life-size picture that added to it. So it kind of I guess broke what the mold was, because it was All-American, 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 and then now it was the first coach.
Mm-hmm. So when you said the board honored him, what do you mean by?
I think the Board of Education is the one that proposed the picture being made and put up.
Okay. All right.
So like I said, Chess would have been the next picture. The next All-American that came on the scene would have been Matt Cavanaugh. Okay, Matt Cavanaugh, who had a phenomenal career, part of the 74 10-0 team, and went on to Pitt. Him and Johnny Pelusi went together there. Johnny was the center on that team. Matt, All-American status, MVP in when they won the national championship in the Sugar Bowl down in New Orleans. They beat Georgia.
Okay.
And as I said, Matt was the MVP. But both him and Johnny had a phenomenal career. And then, of course, Matt got drafted into the NFL. Following Matt would have been Michael Zordich, okay, who also was a first-team All-American at Penn State. And he played in, I believe it was the Sugar Bowl, played in a number of bowl games, but the national championship was, for the national championship, they played Georgia, and I think it was also the Sugar Bowl.
Wow.
And won a national championship there, and like I said, was in a number of other bowl games during his tenure there, but had a great career at Penn State, first team All-American, and then went on to have a great career in the NFL. And following him was Jerry Olsavsky at Pitt. And Pitt had great success recruiting Chaney kids. I mean, as I said, Matt and Johnny Pelusi were there. And then when they recruited Jerry, following him, J.C. Pelusi and the Bull, Jeff Pelusi.
Okay.
He also went to Pitt and played there. Both had great careers, great careers for Pitt. Played in numerous bowl games. And following Jerry Olsavsky would have been Anthony Floyd.
Okay.
Now, in between that, there was, Red's picture went up, Ed's picture went up.
Okay.
And then Anthony Floyd's picture went up. First team All-American for Louisville. Great career there. Gets drafted into the NFL. Phenomenal player. I'm a little prejudiced there. He was one of mine. But again, and I'm very proud of the fact that I coached Jerry O. I was on the defensive side of the football, and I coached Michael Z. And I was an assistant to Ed. Yeah, Anthony was my first, and then following Anthony was, of course, Brad, who went on and was preseason All-American or freshman All-American at Missouri. Was actually recruited by Toledo, and then when the guy got when Pinkel got the job at Missouri, didn't blink, took there, and Brad had a phenomenal career, broke the all-time NCAA rushing and passing totals for a season. And I didn't forget, but the person that went up after McFee, while Red was coaching, was a memorial to Mike Dinero, who was a preseason All-American pick going into his sophomore year. And as I said, a lot of Chaney people look at Mike as maybe the toughest or best player that Chaney ever produced. And that can be debated forever, but there's no question that he was just a phenomenal player, and what a tragedy it was to not see him go on and further establish himself, because there's no question that he had tremendous ability and a tremendous future ahead of him. And it was, like I said, tragically cut short.
Those guys talk about, I think it was a 92 game, playoff game, maybe against Buchtel, when you brought him in and you showed a highlight film. I think Gary Dinero came in and brought a highlight film of Mike, who was his brother, and you guys showed it to him before the game.
Yeah. And it was, if that didn't gas you up, nothing could.
Yeah.
And speaking of Gary, who played at Alabama, Mike's brother Gary, who just recently passed, he was part of 2 national championships, played in a number of bowl games down there for Bear Bryant.
Would he have been around, and I know we talked about this before we came on, would he have been around Brungard's age? Or was he...
Who, Gary?
Yeah. Because I know Brungard was Ohio State, then Alabama.
Correct. Yeah. No, Brungard was actually before Mike Dinero.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like early, mid to 60s, early to mid.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was on Red's 9-0 team. That was 66, I believe.
Okay.
And Yeah, Dave Brungard. Uh, he was part of the Rose Bowl team um, that played USC. I think when Simpson played.
Oh, okay.
But then he transferred over to Alabama, became captain, and you know, did they win the national championship that year? I don't know. And somebody's going to probably call me out on this, but
Well,
he certainly might have.
I mean, so to that point, if somebody knows, yeah, share it. That's great. We don't have a research team here. It's all
Right,
kind of
right.
so that's okay. And it's just conversations. But I was just kind of wondering because I know during that span, Alabama would probably have been in the mix. And,
Correct.
And so I just know that I've heard from Mike Dobrin, a number of guys from that generation that they looked to him like he was one of the guys that they looked up to. And
absolutely.
know.
Yeah. I mean, and people from that era, guys from that era, affectionately referred to him as Brunny. And he was very, very special to Red. I mean, because he was the catalyst to a lot of the great success that
turning that corner.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, the corner was already actually turned when Brungard played. Him and Bria were the two featured. Two featured Ray Bria, two featured backs at that time. But prior to that, they made that turn. That would have been around when the end of Ed's tenure, Ed Matey and Joe Lutzy and Tom Ross and those guys. I mean, they were all instrumental
as players. Sometimes it gets confusing because
sure
the guys were playing and they coach. So okay, so sure. Ed and Joe as players. Gotcha.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's and that those are the guys, and there, like I said, there's probably, I know there's guys in the late 20s and 30s that went on and played major college football and played in the bowl games that I'm not aware of. And
so you mentioned, and I know you mentioned Sam Room because of the All-American piece, but during that national title run, and not a list, but there were probably a number of your guys that were on
no question
that national title team as well.
No question. Dave Del Baccio is one that comes to mind. Great player for us. And I want to say Rich Sylvester and
Dwayne Thompson was on during that time.
Dwayne Thompson.
Well, maybe no. He'd have been he'd have been around that time.
Yes.
Maybe a little younger.
Yes. Brian Terleski.
Yeah.
But Chris Samarone, as I said, and I'm probably repeating myself, but he was on 3 national championship runs.
Yeah.
1, 2. They beat Marshall and they beat Boise State, and was named for first team All-American.
Right.
Matt Gilchrist was part of that.
I was just going to ask, was he part of that national title run? He
would have been. Well, yeah, he
at the tail end probably.
Yeah, well, he came after Chris. So
Yeah.
he certainly was a part of the success, and I'm sure he was. I'm sure he's got a national champion there. It seemed like they were winning it every year.
Yeah, you know what? I forget. I think it was Braden. Why don't you look up what YSU's national championships? Because I know there's about 4 of them. There's 3, and then
Yeah,
couple runner-ups.
Mac would have been 91, 92, 93.
Oh, they definitely had. Yeah.
Yeah.
91, 93, 94, 97.
Yeah. So
He's when they won at 91, 93, 94, 97. And then there's probably 1 or 2 runner-ups in there as well.
Yeah.
A lot of impact on some meaningful big games.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, and again, one of my own, Keelan Dykes at West Virginia, he was part of, I think, all 4 years. They were in 3 Gator Bowls and a Sugar Bowl.
Some really big. I think the one Sugar Bowl, it was like just an epic comeback. They were down, if I remember. I forget who they were playing, but they ended up coming back and winning that one.
Anthony Floyd, I know I talked about him, but you know he led the conference and still holds the record for interceptions, 18 interceptions at Louisville. Was part of 2 Liberty Bowls and 2 GMAC Bowls. Jerry O, Fiesta, Astro Blue Bonnet, Cotton Bowl, and John Hancock Bowl.
The Blue Bonnet Bowl.
The Blue Bonnet Bowl.
I forgot about that one.
Yeah.
The Cotton Bowl down in Dallas.
And I think from what I looked up bowl history, and I'm thinking that Mike DeNiro would have played in a Cotton Bowl Classic.
Okay.
They didn't have Gene Stallings was the coach then, and they didn't have the success as much. You know, they weren't automatics. He was a young coach, and I think they were just coming into prominence. But I do believe he played in a Cotton Bowl. I mentioned Mike Zordich on that Sugar Bowl. They beat Georgia in the Sugar Bowl 27-23. I think that's when the wannabe Senator Herschel Walker was playing. And I know I said this earlier, but I want to repeat that, you know, the names that are associated with Ohio State that you know, Cabello, you know, there's a lot of names from way before my time that I know I'm missing. And I'm sure there's even guys around my time that were in bowl games that Jim O'Malley, you know, that played at Notre Dame. I think a Cotton, Orange, and Fiesta Bowl during his tenure at Notre Dame. Went on to be drafted by the Broncos. There's a lot of dialogue out there about who should be on and who shouldn't be on the Chaney Wall of Fame. Okay. And what's the, you know, I've been asked a number of times, what's the criteria? And I guess the best answer that I could give is I don't think there is a criteria. It was just naturally assumed that you went up if you were an All-American, if you had All-American status. How things played out after that, you know, I know when Red's picture was put up a group of his players, we got together and we had a banquet, and we got some money together, had the picture made, got his okay, and presented it to the school.
So two things. Number one, I was going to ask a while ago, but you were kind of in the middle of it. Like, how were those made or paid for? Because I got to figure they're pretty expensive things. Whether I think at one point they were painted. It looked like they were painted. They weren't actually.
Yeah,
pictures.
I think like Matt's was painted, Chess was painted, Red's was reproduced from an old photo.
Mm-hmm. So it couldn't be cheap, and I guess that was the thing. Like, who would have funded?
Mike's was painted too, Mike De Niro.
Okay, so who would have funded something like that? Was because usually you have your gridirons, or you have your boosters, or you have your Hall of Fame. You have some sort of group that does fundraising, or was this kind of like a grassroots effort for so and so?
I think it was both. I think some were the school took care of, the athletic department,
Mm-hmm.
and some were money was raised.
Okay. And the second thing, you and I have talked about this, and we can not put it out there or whatever. I guess for me, you talked about not having a criteria, and one of the comments I made to you was, I think and we talked about it early, I think the world was fundamentally different. Like, being an All-American was like being an All-Pro. Because I don't even know who you had. Maybe AP at that point in time back in the 40s, and who else? Maybe reporters and maybe a coach's All-American. And like, that was a huge deal. And now every website, every media page, every upstart media company that starts in a basement of a house, can put together an All-American page. And I think or All-American team. And I think that's where, maybe you look at it from a different lens of current. And I mean that respectfully. I'm not.
Yeah. I'm going to get, I'm speculating here. I'm going to guess that the powers that be, whoever makes the decision on pictures that would go up, aren't going to look at a Sporting News All-American.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they want a legit AP, UPI, Scripps Howard, whatever.
Sure.
I mean, whatever the press piece at the time is. But the All-American has gone by the way of bowl games,
Yeah. So do you think that? I guess the problem with that is when it's not spelled out, then you have option for debate, and not that debate's bad, but people could feel like, well, I'm being singled out against being in there because of, you know what I mean? Like, you can always debate, that's great.
Yeah.
But
I would just say this, and this is my 2 cents on the matter, and I'm speaking strictly about the players. Okay, the coaches that are up are up because of their assistants and their players. Okay, they've been
4 in 80 years. I mean, four of you in 80 years. Like that, to me, that's enough.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's, there's a lot of gray area there. you know. But
That's a good gray area.
yeah, and there is. I mean, there's no question. I mean, people can argue. I'm sure about all four coaches that are up there, but I'm speaking to what I think, what my opinion is about the players that are up there. Every single player that's up there, okay, I believe absolutely and positively deserve and there's no question about the validity of them being up there. And I'm not suggesting that there's yipping out in the community out there by alumni that suggests that.
Let me say this. When you talk about that, there's, just to clarify, multi-generational conversations of who should be up there from 60s, 70s, 80s, all the way through. So it's not just one particular.
Correct.
This conversation happens throughout.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. But all the players are Wall of Famers.
No, I think, to be honest with you, it's one of those things where I'm taking a little liberty when I say that, and not by design, but it's almost too exclusive, meaning like anybody up there fundamentally absolutely deserves to be up there, no conversation. And then the other ones, it's almost like nowadays, you want your standards to be high.
Yeah.
And you don't. So that's why it's the Wall of Fame.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what, if anything, comes of it, and how it's continued, or and I think one of the conversations that I think that both of us have talked about was a couple an episode or two back. We talked about, you made a great point. You said it's tough for the current kids to embrace the tradition if the tradition doesn't embrace them. And I think that having some sort of recognition, Hall of Fame, some sort of event to connect the two would be a really bridge building piece to that.
Yeah, I agree.
So
yeah, and I know there's discussion going on now about restarting the Hall of Fame, and I think that's in order, and I told the people that have approached me that, if there's anything I can do to help, but I think some young blood needs to be in there, and it needs to be, kick that thing off again. And I think like you said, it's a great way to kind of bridge the generational gaps that have occurred over the years.
yeah, and I think and we can wrap, this will be my last comment. I think, there's always guys that, and I'm just going to speak from a personal standpoint, there's always guys that scored touchdowns, threw touchdowns, caught touchdowns, that will be in the conversation. There's always those guys that, whether they're in the Hall of Fame, not in the Hall of Fame, they're always going to be relevant because they were the guys carrying the ball. And to me, some of the guys on the defensive side, some of the linemen that, time forgets, that don't necessarily get the opportunity to get in. And I have a couple in my head. But, those are the ones where that recognition will be the only thing they ever have, because people are going to forget about, those numbers 50 through 79. They just, they don't, unless you're a coach or you coached them or you played with them, they just kind of fall by the wayside. But to me, I think that's more important than some of the greats that people debate. But that's because they're always going to debate them. So
I agree.